Hi, my name is Eva Steiner and this is my project Psychotherapists Around the Globe. I am interviewing the psychotherapists around the world and asking them the same 8 questions. I am wondering how mental health profession is in their country. Today we are going to... Thank you for taking this time for doing this interview with me. Before we start, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. My name is Lenka and I'm a full-time psychologist since 2021 and I've been working at state institution called Center of Counseling and Prevention. I work mainly with kids, young adults that are preparing for their occupation. Mostly we are doing assessment, counseling, like assessment in regards to their special education needs, if there are any. So we are also working with families, because if you're working with kids, you have to work with families and schools, teachers. We recommend interventions and like practices when there's, for example, a diagnosis. We support teachers as well.
The first question, tell me a little bit about your culture. What is some holiday or tradition that your country celebrates? And if your culture would be an emotion, what emotion would it be?
I'm from Slovakia, so my country is in basically middle of Europe. We are a small country. We have about 5 million inhabitants. Most Slovaks are proud for our historical heritage. We have a lot of castles, national parks, forests, mountains. I would say we are very similar to countries around us, maybe like Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Austria, Ukraine. We have some connected history as well. Yeah, we celebrate Christmas. We usually eat like a fish, carp, potato salad, mayo. We celebrate New Year's, Easter. But I would say it's a bit different way than the typical Western way. We have this tradition. It's not done as often, I would say, but it used to be like men would have this thing called korbáč. It's like a wooden whip, and they would like gently like beat women and throw like a bucket of water at them. But it's not done like aggressively or not done as much these days. But like, yeah, we are, I would say, mostly Catholic, more on a conservative side. My opinion is like our mentality is really like based around our history, as we were oftentimes oppressed by bigger like nations, maybe like Hungary, Soviet Union, and so on. So there is this strong background.
In what way are you connecting mentality to history? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Because in history, we were oppressed by bigger nations around us. It was like always about enduring the hardships of this oppression, because we didn't have like our language, for example. We had schools and we had to like communicate officially, for example, in Hungarian language or oftentimes German. So it was like learned in schools as well. So that was like a big part of it. And of course, like Soviet Union. So we were like under some kind of control. So I think we are more cautious. People are usually, I would say, more on conservative sides. And the emotion, I was thinking about it, and this kind of feeling of inferiority in our nation, oftentimes like very humble, or maybe we think other nations are doing so much better than us, or they can do things better than us when compare each other, and we are still trying to catch on. Like post-Soviet countries, I would say, are still trying to catch up the lost years in a sense.
Okay, the second question, how did you become a psychotherapist in your country and what is your therapeutic approach?
I'm not a licensed psychotherapist because that's a long journey. Yeah, so I do have master's psychology. So that's a degree you get after like 5 years of university. And right now I'm in like kind of extensive course that's based around systemic approach. So I would say I work mostly with that, but I don't like shy away from like integration. I also have some different courses. For example, I work with Zenplay, whatever I'm comfortable with, and I think that client would appreciate, or I see like client reacting to it.
And in general, in Slovakia, like, do you need to be a psychologist and then you can take additional trainings to become a psychotherapist, or can you go directly to a psychotherapeutic approach?
You cannot do psychotherapy just like as that. You have to have like some kind of university education, but you don't have to be only psychologist. You can also be social worker. You can also be a doctor, for example, or like a special educator. So you can be working in healthcare or like education, social work kind of field. And then you do the training to be a psychotherapist. That is another like 5-ish years. To explain that even better, to be like really licensed, you should have like a clinical special training. From a psychologist, I have to become a clinical psychologist, and then I can do the psychotherapeutic training. So that's a lot of years. But yeah, you can also do the psychotherapeutic training without the clinical extra years, but then you cannot be licensed.
And in that case, you can work only privately, or are you allowed to work in the institutions if you are not officially licensed?
Yeah, you can work under like someone or some institution, basically as a psychotherapist. But if you want to work for yourself, you have to do all these steps. That would be almost, well, more than 10 years of education, definitely.
And is there any law for psychology?
There are like different laws that regulate psychological work. It's a different in healthcare. As I work in education, I work with law that's for educational institutions and so on. Like, for example, school psychologists have their laws in the educational department, and they work with that, not the healthcare department, if that makes sense.
Is there any law for psychotherapy?
I don't know like specifically, but I would say like it's under healthcare. As I do not work in healthcare, I don't have much of an insight on that.
How society looks upon psychotherapy or any psychological help?
I do not like to be like very like generalized, because it's very different from each person's. But I would say it's very different in the cities and in like more rural countryside areas. I'm working in Bratislava, which is our capital city. People are quite open-minded usually, but from time to time, occasionally I get, for example, as we are working with schools, and like school recommends the parent to seek this kind of help. Sometimes they are like skeptical, or they like say they do not believe in psychologists or this kind of help. Or maybe I would say they are afraid to lose their privacy. As we are connected in a way with schools, they are like uncertain what can be used maybe like against them later on if their child has like issues. Yeah, I would say it got better with Corona because it's oftentimes like mentioned in podcasts, articles, news. People seek this kind of help more often. And I would say it's also like available more because of like online platforms. You can do basically therapy, counseling online, and it's available. You can get appointment. You don't have to wait for months and months. You can maybe have an appointment in a few days this way. because you don't have to search just in your own city, own town, so you have options. But yeah, it's I would say expensive, you know. There are options if you can afford it.
The help is available privately through private pay, or the client can also access the psychological help through public systems.
Yes, I, for example, work in public systems. I would say this is pretty much covered, but then for adults, it's more complicated because only a few clinical psychologists are covered by public healthcare.
So basically, if you cannot get a spot with these psychologists, you need to pay for a private practitioner.
Yeah. So that's a bit tricky.
What was some mental health stigma in the past, or maybe still is today?
I would say the typical, if you seek this kind of help, psychological or maybe psychiatric help, you are crazy and insane. And maybe this kind of stigma that normal people don't go to a psychologist. Like if you go, then it means you have some serious issues. Or for example, in my case, parents seek psychological help. It means that they are not good parents because they cannot handle it on their own.
Would you say this stigma is still prevalent?
Yeah, I think some people might think like that, but it's a lot better. I'm not faced with these opinions because I get only the people that want to come. As I said, in Bratislava, I would say it's more normal for people to have a therapist and don't feel ashamed about it or talk about it with their friends.
What is your society teaching about child-parent relationship, and whether this value of society also influence how you design your interventions as a therapist?
As I was saying about our history, I think it has a lot to do with our history because in like previous generations, it used to be more about parent is the authority, you have to respect your elders, and a good kid is a kid that's polite, obedient, or maybe is quiet, has good grades, and so on. So it was more of a like parent is authority and child has to listen and do whatever parents ask them to do. And I feel like that's in connection with maybe the post-Soviet thinking, because in those times you don't want to be like individual, you know, everyone looks the same, behaves the same, everyone agrees with the regime, so you want polite, obedient child that is doing everything by the book. But in my experience, I meet a lot of parents that are gentle parents, or their approach is more like democratic with their kids. And also, I would like to say I feel is an issue with the previous type, with more authoritative type, is that we also use more often than not physical punishment. I don't mean like brutal, like beating. Parents, unfortunately, still sometimes do that. In the first case, when they're more like they want respect and all that, on that side, the intervention would be based around accepting their child as an individual that has maybe different needs and views, sees the world differently as the parent, and try to support that. On the other extreme, where the parent doesn't have any like boundary, the child is roaming freely, in that case we would work more on how to set the boundaries so that the kid is safe in the environment. I'm usually trying to go somewhere in the middle.
And outside your work in Slovakia, what is the expectation of adult children? You grow
Mm-hmm.
up. So what is the relationship towards your parents? What is the expectation there? How are the parents? How is the connection?
Yeah, I would say we have strong like family values. In adult life, you try to help with some housework during the weekends. But I've read some statistics and so on that Slovaks leave their parental household quite late, like maybe somewhere in their 30s even. That's very different from maybe other like Western countries where they leave very early. I would say because of financial reasons and so on. But I have also, many clients that have this kind of mixed feelings because they feel like their parents are toxic, but they feel ashamed or they feel like they cannot cut themselves off because it's very closely knitted together, the families, and it's like disrespectful to say your opinions or to set your boundaries because parents know better, or they have more experience, so they want to feel respected.
And how would your culture look upon such a request if the adult client would say, I don't want to contact with my parents anymore?
I feel like the kids still like this opinion that kids are supposed to have some kind of gratitude towards their parents and to be thankful, to be respectful. It's kind of like maybe the last resort, really, to cut your family off completely.
What are the learned beliefs regarding client-therapist relationship, and can the relationship continue outside the therapy once the therapy process is over?
I'm speaking for myself and my opinions. I cannot really generalize it. I feel like the client comes with this idea that the therapist has it all figured out, is this kind of wise person that knows what to do in every case and knows the best solutions, best options. I would say they usually come with this kind of like, you are the expert and tell me what to do. Tell me how to solve my problem. So it's very professional kind of like relationship in the beginning. So like, just tell me what to do, I will do it, and then we can say bye to each other. But of course, not everyone. Some people are more like trusting and open to having like a human relationship, but some people are very strict with this professional kind of relationship and the idea of it. And the relationship after therapy, I've never seen during my studies or anywhere or in the course I'm attending for the systemic approach. It's never advised to continue the relationship, or it's never advised to be a therapist for your friends or for your neighbors.
If the therapist cross the line and maybe try to form a romantic relationship with the client or friendship, is there any institution where the client can turn to and report the therapist or not?
I don't know about such institution, but maybe we have these like psychological associations. So maybe if the therapist is like officially, licensed, the client can go to that institution and they will probably take away his or her license. And if it's like against the law, then it would be like police and stuff like that.
Okay, the sixth question: is supervision a must for a therapist in your country?
I think it's not really like a written law, but it's strongly advised. The therapists are encouraged to put that on their website, that they are in supervision with this supervisor, to have it as a benchmark, of quality. And it's also advised for clients to look for a therapist that is under some kind of supervision, or to notice also these things before forming the therapeutic relationship. I haven't found any specific law or a rule that it's a must, but it's strongly advised.
What are the most common complaints that a client comes to therapy for?
Well, in my case, for example, children, when they come from like their initiative, it's usually about anxiety, about school, grades, peer groups, their body image, self-harm, bullying. That's usually that. Parents, when they come, they usually wanna know how to help their kids to, for example, learn better, study better. I also oftentimes get this complaint that the child doesn't listen to them or expresses their anger very strongly. Yes, some parents are anxious if they're doing it right. They want to get like a second opinion. And for like individual adults, mostly I get like anxiety again, search for self-value in relationship with parents, like parents in the past and partners, and how that transfers into their relationship with partners.
Well, how society looks upon anger.
Yeah, I oftentimes get like the parents think that their child expresses their anger too much on the outside, so they want to tune it down. So we have to work a lot on the idea that each emotion has its part, and maybe even the idea that a kid cannot regulate their emotion as much as an adult. I feel like adults really wish that their kids could regulate as well as adults. In kids, especially, I feel like the parents are very strict about that here. Even more if it's in public. Kid makes a scene in public, and that's really tough on parents, like how to handle that, what to do, because you get like, dirty looks from other people. So I understand that it's not a great situation to be in, so I feel like they would prefer for their kid to bottle it up, unfortunately. I would say we do have not very like charming statistics about domestic abuse and with maybe alcohol abuse. It was not as common for a father to be like emotionally present in the family. That definitely like plays a role. I would say it was not really common to talk about emotions with your parents before. I do like get parents that are trying to rethink their patterns and how they were brought up so it does not repeat on their children. For example, if their parents were too strict, they have maybe tendency to be too gentle with no boundaries because they don't want their kid to go through the strict parenting atmosphere as they were going through.
If you would share one tool, belief, or approach that is a must-have for you as a therapist, what would it be?
Yeah, for me, it would be this idea or advice to not understand your client too early. It's usually more complex, and I think you can be really surprised about what the client can do themselves. And if you like close your mind too early and you think you have it figured out, and it's taking your like the options away. Another advice would be stay human in the relationship. Don't put the burden of expertise on yourself. The client is the expert on their life, and they know better about what options they have, what they can do, what's best for them. And the therapist would be an expert on how to conduct the dialogue. You don't have to provide the answers. I think it's important for me to stay like a human in the relationship, because if the client sees you as the expert or as a person that has all the answers in the world, I think maybe it can work, but I feel like it's a dangerous path in the long run. because everyone's so different. And as a therapist, I think you need to stay also like curious, be open-minded to learning all the time.